Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Tuesday afternoon. The Michigan commitment sweatshirt comes back on for another monster, especially along the line of scrimmage. Four-star defensive lineman Julian Walker committing to Michigan. Now, let's start with this. Go look at a picture of Julian Walker. That is how you want your line of scrimmage players to look in the Big Ten. This kid just straight up looks the part and has the athletic profile to back it up. But secondly, before we even get into the player of Julian Walker, we've talked about how Michigan moving a little bit different, feeling a little bit different on the recruiting trail. This is one of those examples where you look at Julian Walker from the state of South Carolina and say, hey, one of the more coveted defensive linemen in that region. But more importantly, this kid was considered a lock to go to South Carolina. His dad works with the South Carolina program. And I'll start with this. It's not like South Carolina is a program that's in turmoil. I happen to be extremely high on where South Carolina is going. Michigan going down into the state of South Carolina and kind of just taking a player that was kind of locked in to go to South Carolina. That tells you the pull, the gravitational pull that Michigan has on the recruiting trail. Number two, legendary defensive line class that Lou Esposito is putting together, and it's filled with just freaky athletic profiles. I mean, you go look at the picture right here. This is the defensive line class, or at least some of the defensive line class that is committed to Michigan. I'll start with this. That's how I want my defensive linemen to look, and here's what stands out to me. What's one thing we know about Lou Esposito? We know he can develop guys. We've been saying it all class long. The athletic profiles that Lou Esposito is injecting into this room with the confidence that I have in terms of player development that Lou Esposito brings, it's hard to not see Michigan dominating the line of scrimmage over the next couple of years. Then lastly, roster building and doing it the right way. Couple of different things in terms of what I mean by that. Number one, go back to the early summer months, right before the month of June, as we were previewing the official visits that Michigan was about to take place with. And we said, hey, the premium position, the position that Michigan needs to get right in 2026, we all said, and many of y'all said it in the comment section as well, was the defensive line. Michigan's done that and more. And look, I get recruiting rankings matter. And as a Michigan fan, it's damn fun to follow what the recruiting rankings are telling us right now. Well, guess what matters a little bit more? Building the roster the right way. Michigan needed to inject talented defensive linemen into this roster. They certainly did so. More importantly, this is the recipe for Michigan winning the Big Ten championship, winning the national championship. You go back to when Michigan was rolling, and really this program still is. It's because they dominate the line of scrimmage. Then secondly, hey, you want to dominate the line of scrimmage. Well, you can't land guys that look like Julian Walker, that have the upside of Julian Walker. Can't land those guys in the transfer portal. And so Michigan identified a position they needed to get right. They knew you can't really address it in the transfer portal. And gosh darn it, have they done that over the last couple of weeks on the recruiting trail. Really excited to get into Julian Walker. I apologize. We're 4 minutes in. We barely even talked about Julian Walker, but I had some stuff I wanted to get off my chest. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, the Michigan fans who've been along for the ride, appreciate you guys. As a Michigan fan, they're just going back to late November and kind of extending this into the summer. There's really not been a 12-month span that's been more fun to talk Michigan on the recruiting trail than what we just went through and what we're currently going through. Cannot thank you guys enough for rocking with it. We will continue to break down the commitments as they come in. Believe it or not, Michigan ain't done. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into Julian Walker. And let's start with the pros. And the pros are the size, the length, the athleticism. This is a guy that at 6'6", 255, ton of length in the arms. You ain't going to find many defensive linemen that move the way Julian Walker does. Number two, versatility. My player comp for Julian Walker might be a guy like Mike Morris. I mean, you remember Mike Morris coming out of high school, 6'5", 255, a big, broad frame, but relatively lean. What happened to Mike Morris is, hey, let's just go put on a little bit more weight. Let's set that play strength up, and you're going to be a problem as an athlete with all that length on the inside. There's a chance that Julian Walker is just a heavy-handed edge defender. Michigan does value those guys a lot. I look at Julian Walker and say, gosh darn it. I mean, 6 months in the Michigan weight room, this kid very well could be carrying 290, maybe 300 pounds really, really well. So you have some versatility in terms of how you want to use him, which, look, matters, because you take a look at what Michigan's bringing in that edge room and say, look, we got a lot of good football players that we want to get on the football field, both on the edge and on the inside. The ability to play Julian Walker all along the defensive line, to me, that's a really good asset that Julian Walker brings to the table. Now, getting into a little bit of the film, he's really fun to watch because you see a couple of things that you really do like. And I think most notably, it's the combination. One, you can tell this kid's just a big, long dude that knows how to use his length. I mean, you see him just kind of benching out this tackle right now, then winning on the inside. Really good motor on this kid. You talk about closing speed and being able to close on the quarterback, it's there. Now we're going to see a double team where you see a little bit of everything. Number one, swim move on the tackle. Then we're using our hands to beat the guard. We're bending pretty well for a cat that's 6'6", 255, and then we're running and chasing. This is a guy that plays with the real hot motor, and he has that closing speed, which, look, that matters. I mean, you look at where these quarterbacks are in the present day of college football, they're athletes. You got to have defensive linemen that can go run, chase, and tackle these quarterbacks when they look to extend plays. This is probably maybe the con or something you want to see Julian Walker get better at. You know, at 6'6", 250, it's hard sometimes for him to play with elite leverage. And there are some times where you want him to be a little bit more powerful and set the edge a little bit more effectively than he does right here. Comes out of a stance a little bit high, gets moved off the line of scrimmage, probably more than you probably want. He makes up for it with really, really good athleticism. Like, this is a guy that knows how to get off blocks. When he gets off blocks, he can be a presence laterally in the run game. Really rangy cat that can kind of fly all over the line of scrimmage and be active in the run game. Continue to work through it. This is kind of where I see him, where you're going to see him matched up on the guard here, you know, kind of shaded in outside the tackle. He's going to be essentially going up against this right guard, and you see these guards are going to have problems. And this is kind of why I see him maybe playing on the inside. They ain't going to be that many guards who have the athleticism and length to deal with Julian Walker. So if you can put weight on the right way with Julian Walker, I think he can be a presence on the inside of that defensive line. And, you know, the thing I'll say with Julian Walker is he's got a much broader, thicker frame than Carter Meadows. And Carter Meadows 6'6", and really long. I think he might be longer than Julian Walker, but his frame's a little bit narrow. And you kind of know that he's probably not going to get heavier than 250 pounds. He's probably going to stay out on the edge. I look at Julian Walker and say, golly, he looks like a guy that could comfortably hold 300 pounds because it's a little bit of a wider, thicker frame. Look, I trust Esposito. Like, wherever they want to play Julian Walker, this is a guy that has the traits that you're looking for to be a difference maker on the defensive line. Michigan has had success with those kind of guys. You know, thick Chris Jenkins coming out of high school. He was around 240 pounds, but we knew he had a pretty thick frame, put on some weight, moved on the inside, second-round NFL draft pick. Very similar from Mike Morris. You know, came out of high school as a 3-star prospect, put on some weight, moved to the inside. He went to the NFL too. That could be the avenue that Julian Walker kind of goes through as well. Regardless, it's not like Michigan needs bodies in the middle of that defensive line with Titan Davis and Alistair Vallejo, two guys that I really like as well. Michigan's got 6 commitments on the defensive line, 5 of which are blue chips, and then the other one, Tariq Bani, he might be, he doesn't have the upside, I don't think, in the athletic profile of a guy like Carter Meadows or a guy like Julian Walker. Pure football player. Heck, he might be the best one committed to Michigan right now. Now, is he going to be the best football player in 3 years in this class? No, probably not. Really good football player that kind of, you know what you're going to get from him. Does Michigan add one more guy on the defensive line? I ain't putting nothing by them right now. Like, if that was my pick, I'd say, yeah, Deuce Gerald's. Like, look, if you want to grab another defensive lineman out of high school and maybe have to go to the transfer portal and grab a guy in the secondary, I'm okay with it. because you can go out and get a solid player in the secondary, or you can go get a wide receiver in the portal. Guess what's really hard to do? It's hard to find a guy like Deuce Gerald's. And what I think Deuce Gerald's can be, it's hard to find those guys in the portal. You're seeing Michigan emphasize line of scrimmage recruiting at the high school ranks for two reasons. One, it's going to be the recipe in terms of how Michigan wins national championships. But number two, we know it's really hard to find these guys in the portal. Michigan continues to roll. Another monster get with Julian Walker. We'll sign out there. Hey, we'll continue to break them down as they come in. Difference maker and a guy that gives you a lot of versatility on the defensive line. Appreciate you guys for rocking with it. Again, the amount of support the Michigan fans have shown has been amazing. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.